Name is Deacon Chuck Koesterer. I am the deacon here at St. James. I became a deacon. I was ordained June the 4th, 2011, and joined the staff at that particular time. For St. James, I'm here to do, as an ordained permanent deacon, I am able to do baptisms, witness weddings, preside at funerals, go to wake services, which is generally where I get called upon most, is to help out in the funeral home. As Father Mike and Father Michael are very busy as priests, and sometimes they get called in different directions, and there may be someone who's called and said, hey, I'd like to have a deacon pray the rosary at the funeral home for my loved one. Could you do that? And Father will call me and say, hey, I'm a little busy right now. I understand if you don't have time, but could you go cover for this? So that's great. I've had the opportunity to witness and preside over funeral services for some veterans at the Leavenworth National Veterans Cemetery, which is always a great honor for me to be able to serve in that particular role. And maybe it might be interesting that we talk a little bit about the permanent versus what the kind of a deacon is. I am a permanent deacon, which means I've taken a vow not to pursue any further my holy orders, but there are also transitional deacons that usually spend the last year of their education as a transitional deacon, doing the same thing that I am as a permanent deacon, but they're moving on to the priesthood, so they don't take the vow of not pursuing any further. So as a permanent deacon, this is my state in life. I'm able to be married, but once something happens to my spouse, I can't remarry. I'm just like a priest. I have to live a celibate life after that, which can be a challenge for some guys. It's interesting when in the formation process they ask you, what do you think if your wife isn't here anymore? Well, how are you going to handle that? Well, when you're young and you kind of think, well, that's no big deal. I can survive that, but you don't think about what's going to happen when you get a little bit more older and things start breaking down, and now you don't have that person there to run you to the doctor's office or take care of you, and if you happen to become disabled or not able to function and slow down. So it's really kind of an interesting decision to make, and it's always interesting when they ask the wives. They go, I don't know, I'm not going to be here, so it doesn't really affect me anyway. It gives me the opportunity to meet lots of different people and meet them where they're at in their faith journey, help them along the way with whatever questions they have, try to explain maybe some heavy theological items or ideas in a way that maybe they can understand, or questions that they have. Well, I was born outside of St. Louis in Illinois, a small town of Belleville, Illinois. And then when I was 6 years old, we moved to Waterloo, Illinois, which is a rural community just outside of South St. Louis. It was interesting that when I was a seventh grader, we had a transitional deacon came to our parish, and at that time I thought I was being called to the priesthood. I attended St. Henry's Junior Seminary for a couple of summers and weekends just to see if high school seminary was a calling of mine. Wisely, my aunt said that, why don't you experience a co-ed high school? So I went to the diocesan high school in my hometown. She said, if you still have the call after 4 years, then you can go ahead and why don't you go into then there must be a call. So oddly enough, I never thought about that again until probably 15 years ago when I saw an ad in the paper from the diocese saying that they were going to form a next class of permanent deacons. So probably the call I was looking at that point was more a call to the diaconate rather than a call to the priesthood. Me and my wife have been married for 34 years. We just celebrated our anniversary a few weeks ago. We have 2 children, both girls. They went through St. James Catholic School as well as St. Pius X High School. And we have been a member of this parish since 1987. Oh, let's see. My favorite movie, probably right now, I have lots of favorite movies, but Gran Torino was probably one of my favorite movies to go back to. It might seem, if you've seen Gran Torino, an odd movie to enjoy with some of the language and ethnic slurs that are in there, but if you watch the understanding of how he comes to grow to know the people that he hated, his neighbors, he at the end, from the beginning, he can't stand them, doesn't want anything to do with them, and then as he gets to know them or walks in their shoes, he becomes more appreciative of them, and then at the end, basically sacrifices his life for it. It's interesting. Somebody pointed out to me one time, I didn't notice the first couple of times I watched it, but that when Clint Eastwood is killed in the end, he's in the form of Christ. His arms are outstretched like Christ was on the cross. So I like that movie. I'm not exactly sure. I think service, growing up, my dad was always involved in service. I never really looked at that until now, as I kind of look back over my childhood of how he never really, lived out a very Christ-like life. He never thought about, if I'm going to help this person out, what are they going to do for me? He just, if someone needed help, he would just jump in and help out. He helped around the church. He and 3 other gentlemen spent every Saturday for a couple of years remodeling the rectory at our home parish. And then we always had a church picnic, and he was always one of the first ones up there to either volunteer to take over work the hamburger stand, or be there to set the stands up and help in whatever way he was. So I think that the deacon, as in Greek, diakonos, is servant. So I think that's probably was my biggest influence, and my biggest call to the diaconate was the service. Yeah, it's an interesting question, that what would they be attracted to him. I think if you're attracted to service, we had a deacon come to St. James probably 20 years ago, and I thought I had the call to it, and asked him some more information. He said, "What are you doing right now?" At that point, I wasn't doing too much service-wise, and he said, "Well, you need to be doing more service in order to become a deacon." So that was a little bit off-putting for me. I almost turned away from that. But I think if your heart is the heart of a servant, and you want to influence people and get to know people, walk on their journey, one of the benefits that we have, I've had several opportunities to sit with someone who is actively dying and bring the Divine Mercy Chaplet to them. And it's interesting to watch the Divine Mercy Chaplet as you're praying it with someone who's dying, the comfort. They're stressed out at the beginning. By the end, they come to the feeling, because many of us, as we're facing our last days, question, what have I done with my life? Have I sinned? Is God going to judge me? Which way am I going to go? So, I think the Divine Mercy Chaplet brings much comfort to them, that, Jesus died for our sins, and he's there to help us and be our guide to heaven. So. I'm here to serve and happy to answer any questions you have. I do a Saturday morning faith sharing class, and you're always welcome to come to participate in that, and able and willing to answer any questions you have. I'm always happy to meet people after Mass and see where they're at, what they're doing, and how they're doing, in whatever way I can answer. So